Everyone knows Leonidas died in a single morning. Almost no one knows he chose that morning. But why? First of all, when he died his heroic death, he was 60. A bit surprising, right? Suddenly, it becomes clear we actually do not know that much about this energetic guy with a sexy set of abs. Mostly because he did not have that sexy set of abs. He was not a lean bottle full of testosterone whose motivation you can guess in one glance. It is one thing to shout, "Sparta," like it is leg day, and a very different thing to reach gray hair age. Know exactly that you are dying today, wash your face, have breakfast, finish all your business, set everything in order, and then go, well, slow, painful death with multiple stab wounds and a near guarantee of brutal post-mortem humiliation. Sold. Leonidas did not choose Thermopylae because it was the perfect backdrop for a selfie. There was already a fortification there, a very old Phocian wall, built back when people were worried the Thessalians might show up uninvited. Leonidas had that wall strengthened in advance. He did not just wander into a scenic mountain pass for the drama. He acted like a seasoned field commander. Narrow terrain, check. A defensive wall, check. Control of the only known bypass route, check. You know, the boring military stuff that actually keeps you alive. This legendary last stand everyone loves. It was, at first, a perfectly rational defensive plan. A plan that only failed because someone local decided to sell the map of the back door to the Persians. Bad neighbor energy, you know? And maybe, just maybe, Leonidas allowed himself a tiny hope. Why not? A tiny hope that if he held the pass long enough, if the gods, the weather, and the rest of Greece finally got their things together, he might live. Where could Leonidas have counted on reinforcements from? Yes, basically, Sparta itself. And if you think he handpicked the best of the best, and that magically equaled 300? Nope. He just took what he had, his royal guard, 300 men who already had the job of sticking with the king everywhere he goes. No auditions, no dramatic drum roll. Just, hey, you are with me. The rest of Sparta? Busy, like very busy. They were celebrating the Carnia, a massive religious festival. And when ancient Spartans partied, it was not no Zoom meetings and a trip to Walmart. It was holy. War is absolutely no-go holy. And because the universe has a sense of humor, there was also the Olympic Games going on. And this is not about the Turkish shooter who forgot to wear the uniform. It was another sacred celebration. And yeah, you do not go to war during sacred celebrations, so why march out early? Why not wait until the divine calendar cleared up? Why rush into a meat grinder with only 300 men? Not exactly typical grandpa logic, right? Because Leonidas was not just an old commander, he was an old politician. And politically, he could not step out to meet Xerxes. If no Spartan army showed up to greet the Persians, the other Greeks might assume Sparta had switched sides. People jumped alliances back then faster than influencers jump sponsorships. So no, this was not testosterone doing push-ups. This was a calculated political choice. Narrow pass, check. Fortified wall, check. The only mountain bypass covered, check. Festivals ending soon, check. Leonidas knew exactly what he was doing. If betrayal by Ephialtes had not blown up the plan, he might have simply walked back home, never becoming a martyr. And if you ask anyone who has seen 2 or 3 YouTube videos about Leonidas, why did he choose to die? They will say, because the oracle said so. Like Leonidas just woke up one day, checked his horoscope, and it said, lucky numbers, none. Best career move, heroic sacrifice. The famous prophecy, you know the one. Either the king must die or Sparta must fall. Very subtle. Really gives a man options. And here is the thing, we should not dismiss it. not with smug 21st century brains. Back then, the divine was not a metaphor. 60-year-old kings were not ironic Reddit atheists with question-everything mugs. For Leonidas, the gods were real, and their messages were very real. So if the oracle told him, "A king must die so Sparta can live," Leonidas did not hear symbolic self-improvement journey. He heard, "Tag, you're it." And honestly, if you are a Spartan king pushing 60, with knees that crack like a campfire and a job that rarely offers retirement, believing your death might actually save everyone you love, that is not madness. That is a plan. So yes, the oracle mattered. Faith mattered. He marched into Thermopylae not because he wanted to die, but because he knew his death had a purpose. But when the oracle said, "The king must die so Sparta survives," she did not specify which king. Sparta had two of them. Yeah, not a deal of the week situation at Zara, but a real ancient buy one, get one monarchy. And it was not a bug, it was the feature. The whole system was built like this. One king goes to war, the other stays home to keep Sparta from doing something stupid like invent democracy. And the tradition began with a pair of royal twins. Ancient Greeks looked at two newborn boys and said, "Well, we'll take both, thanks." Checks and balances, but with spears. This way, the state did not die just because one king did. Smart, cold, effective, very Sparta. So, logically, if a king must die for the city, why Leonidas? Why not the other guy? I mean, fate had options. There were two thrones, one funeral slot. So why did Leonidas decide that he must be the one to die? Especially since he was never supposed to sit on a throne at all. Leonidas was not born a king. He was not even born second in line. He was the royal equivalent of that younger sibling who gets the hand-me-down everything. His older brother Cleomenes was the crown. His other brother Dorius was the spare crown. Leonidas, he was the spare for the spare. A prince so extra you could almost hear Sparta saying, "Just don't break anything." And then came the drama. Family scandals, political chaos, tragic deaths, the kind of royal soap opera even Netflix would reject for being too much. By a chain of accidents, or signs from the gods, depending on your worldview, Leonidas suddenly went from third-string nobody to king of Sparta. A man who was never meant to rule now stood at the top of the most feared military culture on Earth. Which raises the real question. If your entire life was a series of impossible coincidences pushing you upward, one after another, at what point do you start thinking, maybe this is not an accident? Maybe you start believing you were chosen. Maybe, when an oracle whispers, "A king must die," you do not ask which king, because deep down you already know the answer. But it was not just about the oracle. It was exactly because Leonidas was never in the future king plan that his instructors skipped all the pampering and went straight to the pain. Apparently, unlike other Spartan kings, Leonidas was not exempt from the agog. That famously brutal Spartan military upbringing we all keep hearing stories about. The place where Sparta turned boys into either warriors or fertilizer. There, he learned, pain is breakfast, fear is useless, and death is just a thing that happens to other people until it is your turn. So we have every reason to believe Leonidas knew exactly what he was walking into. He was not just commanding war machines, he was built in the same grinder. His choice was conscious, not impulsive. And one more thing, Leonidas was not picked just to lead Spartans. He was chosen to command all of Greece, Athens, Corinth, Thebes, Argos. Every city-state that could still stand looked at a 60-year-old Spartan king and said, "Yeah, that guy." Not the younger general, not the prince with better hair. Him. Because Leonidas was not a Spartan hero. He was the hero the Greeks needed. He was one of the oldest commanders still ready to swing a sword, probably the only one who had lived through the Agage meat grinder. And everyone obeyed him without a second thought, because he was a king in every sense. Interestingly, after Thermopylae and the Persian Wars, leadership of the anti-Persian alliance gradually shifted toward Athens. They didn't go hunting for another Spartan. Not because Spartans are elite, but because they wanted the best warrior alive. Leonidas led not because he was Spartan, but because he was Leonidas. He was the most experienced, the most reliable person for the job. And of course, he knew that. But that was not the only thing he knew. Leonidas was a king of Sparta not by chance. His right to rule came from his lineage. He was a descendant of Heracles. He was written into mythology before he was even born, a hero by blood. And he took that very seriously. He saw the world of heroes and myths as a real part of his life, and himself as a real part of that world. And in that world it was obvious to him that he, the descendant of Heracles, must be the king who dies so Sparta can live.